No, this is a really just complicated passage, and part of it is because when we read Paul's letters, we are listening to like one side of a phone conversation. There's a huge context, a bunch of things going on that we don't know. And in this case, we really wish we knew, and we're going to make some guesses about what Paul is dealing with in this section. But ultimately, it comes down to the fact that Paul was feeling attacked. Or not feeling attacked, he was being attacked. And as we're going to learn in a few minutes, it seemed like there was a group of people that were trying to undermine him and his authority. But before we get to like the text itself, I want to set up for a minute just the nature of attacking and being attacked. And I don't mean like physically, like attacking with a brick or something like that. I mean like emotionally and verbally. Because ultimately that's what Paul's dealing with. So I want to set up just a few principles or ideas, and we'll see how those play out with what Paul is doing and hopefully help us out along the way. The first big point about feeling attacked, like when you feel like somebody is attacking you, and I don't have a bullet point for this one, is that if you find that someone in particular or a group of people are attacking you all the time, the problem probably isn't with them. It's like it's kind of the person who has had a bunch of different jobs and everybody that they've worked with is an idiot. Okay, who's really the problem here? Just statistically, you didn't work with everybody who happens to be dumb and you're the only capable one. In the same way, if you're feeling particularly attacked by someone and everything they say is attacking you, then you are probably feeling really defensive. You're taking a defensive posture toward them, and there's something going on deep within you. So I just want to point that out. Now, a couple of just things about feeling attacked within our relationships. One, the issue is probably not the issue. When somebody attacks you, they insult you, they cut you to the core, they point out things that are wrong with you, whether it be a family member, a spouse, a coworker, or a boss, or whomever. If you think about it like this, a healthy person, emotionally and spiritually, is not likely to do that. If you think about the Gospels, Jesus does not do that. And if somebody were to just call out these supposedly personal things about you, that tends to say a lot about them because they're the kind of person that would actually do that to somebody. But spoiler alert, we all do it. Secondly, it's not personal even when it is. The problem with attacks, somebody who is just cutting into you, they are insulting you, they are telling you what is wrong about you or what you are doing wrong, even if they are speaking personally, like calling out personal things to you, it comes from an area of brokenness within their own lives. Because again, if somebody is truly healthy, emotionally and spiritually, they are not going to talk like that, especially to people that they supposedly have a relationship with. Now that comes with a caveat or an extra bit of warning. If you find yourself in conflict with somebody or somebody is attacking you, it is not okay to then come back to them and say, you know what you're saying comes from a very deep place of brokenness within your own life. You're probably not wrong, but it's wrong to point that out, no matter how good it might feel, because then you're attacking them. And then finally, the goal when somebody is attacking you is to stand what's called your sacred ground. We're going to expand on that in a little bit. We'll define the sacred ground as the sense where you know who you are. And I'm purposefully starting in a very kind of secular, therapeutic way, because we're going to see how Paul takes this and expands it. But it's the ability to say, I am who I am. What you are saying to me is, it's sounding very personal. It may be a personal attack, but it comes from a place of brokenness within you, because healthy people don't say that. It is not something that I have to take personally. You cannot make me feel a certain way. I own my own reactions and responses. You cannot make me feel angry. I choose to feel angry. However, the other side of standing this sacred ground is also being able to ask them, ask yourself, does what they say have a kernel of truth? Standing sacred ground also is being able to say, they're attacking in a very personal, painful way. It's personal to them. I don't have to listen to this, but do they have a point? My first congregation, when I was getting kind of started out in ministry, I for a little while, and then it stopped, and then they came back for some reason, I would get these anonymous letters from the church, or when you fill out like the comment cards and stuff like that. They were anonymous, and they would then proceed to tell me everything that I did wrong during the service, whether it's preaching or whatever. Now, first off, don't do that. It doesn't help anything. And if you want to say something, at least have the courage to sign your name to it, because then we can actually talk. But the senior pastor with whom I worked did this, and it was actually really helpful, even though I kind of hated it. We would take it, we would read it, we would say, all right, this is ridiculous that they're not signing this, their name to it. We're not going to take this seriously at all. However, do they have a point? And sometimes, not often, but sometimes, we'd have to say, yeah, kind of. Standing your sacred ground is being able to recognize that this person is acting in a place of brokenness. They are angry, and they may actually be angry about something else entirely. Again, the issue is probably not the issue. And being able to say, like, okay, I don't have to feel hurt by this, but then also having the courage to say, do they have a point? This is the very difficult and painful thing about feeling attacked. That people are probably reacting to something else in their lives, or they are trying to make you responsible for something that they're feeling, probably. It's not personal to you, it's personal to them, even though they want it to seem like that, or we want it to seem like that when we're attacking other people. We're all as guilty. And the best thing you can do is to be able to say, I am my own person, you cannot tell me who I am, while also saying, do you have a point? So now we're going to see how Paul works roughly with, well, not within this framework. I kind of pulled this out from what Paul is doing. And you'll notice that the verses jump around. I think this section makes a lot more sense if you do some things earlier rather than later, because this is just a tough passage. So Paul says about midway through, for some say his letters are weighty and forceful, but in person he is unimpressive and his speaking amounts to nothing. Such people should realize that what we are in our letters when we are absent, we will be in our actions when we are present. So one of the issues that Paul is dealing with, and I think this is the core of the people who are attacking him, was that some group of people in the Corinthian church had begun to undermine Paul's authority. We don't know who they were, but they began to point out these flaws within Paul. because Paul was not a Greek person or a Roman person. He was a Hebrew. And a Greek and Roman person, or Greco-Roman person, valued something called rhetoric, the ability to arrange everything that you're saying in a logical and compelling way. They loved the spoken word. Some of the greatest speakers of human history come from this period of time. It's a little earlier, but people like Aristotle wrote tons about how to speak well. Cicero, the Roman orator, the speaker, if you're ever on Jeopardy or whatever, like he wrote just tomes of it. There are countless people who devoted their entire lives to speaking well. Paul did not. And so one of the things that they were trying to do in gain influence over this Corinthian church was to point out that Paul was deficient. He wasn't this speaker. He was a writer. He wrote letters, and boy, he could get to the point really quick and well. He could make his point writing. But he's just not that great of a speaker. I think other people should have their say. There are others like Apollos. He's a leader. He should be in charge. And then Paul says, you guys should realize that what we are in our letters, in other words, the way he approaches things, because Paul could write very forcefully, when we are absent, we will be in our actions when we get there to Corinth. In other words, this is like saying, don't make me act like how I write. Because if you need to be called to the carpet, I will. So then, Paul says, and this has become one of my favorite verses in the Bible, at least the second half. He says, we do not dare to classify or compare ourselves with some who commend themselves. This is the part I love. When they measure themselves by themselves and compare themselves with themselves, they are not wise. Did you get that? Just easy done, does it? Yeah. It's like if you wrote that in an English essay in high school, you would get marked off for it. But think about what he's saying. He's saying, he's pointing out that these people who are speaking against Paul, attacking him, and undermining his authority, have developed their own criteria for who would be a great leader, who needs to be in charge of Corinth or the church of Corinth around here. And then they're saying, well, hey, we fit that bill. Our guy, Apollos, he fits that bill. Therefore, they should be in charge. Now, it would be like me saying, in the absence of Pastor Christensen, because he's not here today, saying, you know what? You know what the quality of a good pastor and church leader is? It's being able to grow a really awesome beard. Now, mine is cut very short, but I can grow a really awesome beard. I've been shaving since I was 12. And it would be like then me convincing you guys that is the mark of a true leader. Pastor Christensen, well, he's clean shaven. Bummer. I think maybe I should be in charge. In other words, I'm developing my own criteria, and lo and behold, I live up to that criteria perfectly. And as Paul points out, they are not wise. This is a very deep, very biting criticism of the way that they are approaching things. It actually goes all the way back to like Genesis 2 or 3, that when you choose or define wisdom for yourself, you fracture what it means to be created by God. Choosing wisdom for yourself, defining your own criteria, is the basis for the sin and brokenness in our world. He is saying, these guys who are attacking me, they are setting up for themselves what it means to be a leader in the church, and they are duping you. They are not acting within the rhythm and flow of creation itself. So then he says, neither do we go beyond our limits by boasting of work done by others. Our hope is that as your faith continues to grow, our sphere of activity among you will greatly expand, so that we can preach the gospel in the regions beyond you. For we do not want to boast about work already done in someone else's territory. So here now he's getting to the point. And notice that he hasn't really been attacking the people who have been attacking him. He has pointed out what they're doing and saying they are not wise in doing that. But he's not directly attacking them. Paul does not always have this maturity. In the book of Galatians, he wrote that furiously. He sent it too early. He got mean and he crossed the line. Paul is just as human as you are. But in this case, we can learn that he is, rather than attacking back somebody who is attacking you, he is now starting to explain who he is and why he does what he does. Because I don't know if you've ever noticed this in life. If somebody is attacking you, attacking back never has the effect that we want it to. As much as we would want, and as much as like that just internal drive goes, like, oh, if I just lay them out with this, then that's going to prove my point, and then you just become more of the part of the problem. What Paul is saying here is that while there may be some who are trying to take credit for the faith community in Corinth, he is saying that God has given us this charge. He has worked through us, and he is continuing to call us into more of what God wants for us. This is him standing his sacred ground. It's saying that if somebody is going to attack me, the first thing you need to do is to remember that you are created in the image of God, that divinity itself took on flesh in the person of Jesus, and it took on and embodied the human experience, even mortality. That he took on the darkest parts of your heart, the parts that attack, that cut, that bite at the fellow human being in front of you whom you love. And he took that into the grave with him. And when God raised him from the dead, he created a new reality in all of human history. And when you were baptized and received Jesus, that new reality began blossoming within you too. Standing your sacred ground is beginning everything with that. This is who I am. This is who God has made me. Now I will hear what you have to say. Paul is reminding them and modeling for them that this is who I am. And then this actually goes back ahead. Now, some of this will make a little bit more sense. He says, we demolish arguments and every pretension that sets itself up against the knowledge of God, and we take captive every thought to make it obedient to Christ. He's actually talking about the people who are attacking him, who are setting up their own ways of judging Paul, and of course, Paul comes up lacking. But he is saying, no. I have a lens through which I view everything, including myself. That lens is that I am a child, and I am a redeemed and loved child of God. That same animating spirit that caused Jesus to walk out of his tomb is alive and at well within me. That God has marked me as sacred space and has called me to be an ambassador of that new reality. Whatever you now say to me, I will interpret through that lens. Which means that sometimes people are saying things that have some truth to it. but it also removes their ability to undermine who I am. So even if I boast somewhat freely about the authority of the Lord, about the authority the Lord gave us for building you up rather than tearing you down, I will not be ashamed. Now that's an odd translation. It's misleading. I will not be ashamed of it. Should be, I will not be disgraced. I will not be made ashamed. In other words, he's boasting too. The people undermining Paul were boasting about their own abilities and their own pretensions. Paul is boasting, but he is boasting about what God has done, who God has made him, not him. He's not boasting about himself. He is again standing his sacred ground. Rather than taking it personally and attacking back, he's trying to address the issue under the issue. So then Paul says later on, we, however, will not boast beyond proper limits, but will confine our boasting to the sphere of service God himself has assigned to us, a fear that it also includes you. Now, not only is he saying, God has made me into this person, this is who God, or what God has given me to do, he then puts himself under the people to whom he's writing. This is genius. Because he's not only saying, this is who God has made me, as though I'm going to become prideful, but he's going to be excited about the fact that God has made him beneath the people to whom he is writing. He will now serve and spend his energy and his time and his life serving the very people who are trying to attack him. Because that's who God has made him God has made him to be. And then he ends with this, but let the one who boasts boast in the Lord. For it is not the one who commends himself who is approved, but the one whom the Lord commends. See, when people attack us, or maybe more accurately, when we attack other people, because we always do, we are placing ourselves in a weird position of authority over other people. We are calling people out as though we were in the place of God himself. And we are all guilty of this. And when we are attacked, it is so painful because, on the one hand, sometimes they may have a point, and you may find that the angrier you get at this person for attacking you could be because they have a much better point than you want to admit. But at the same time, it also becomes just inappropriate. It becomes undermining to who you are as a person, and that just hurts. And it removes your ability to actually hear what the person is saying. And I'll be the first to tell you that this is hard for me. I do not deal with this very well. And I think that at least this part is true for you. The more that person means to you, the harder and more painful this is. It's harder to stand your sacred ground when you really love or you care about or you respect the person that is attacking you, whether they are your spouse, your sibling, your boss whom you respect. This gets hard. But what Paul demonstrates here, and I encourage and pray for all of us, is that we learn that we are sacred space standing on sacred ground, not because of anything that we can boast about, but because of what God has made us into. Places as temples where God himself dwells. People for whom Jesus himself, divinity in flesh, has died for. That stand your sacred ground so that you can hear what you need to hear, but also that you are not crushed because of somebody who is acting out of their brokenness or their own issues. May you stand your sacred ground because of what Jesus has done for you, because of who God has told you you are, as places where new creation, life transformed out of death, is blossoming and growing in your heart. May we all follow Jesus in deeper discipleship, learning who we are, learning what this means, so that when we are attacked, rather than crushing us, it will be a place where we can grow, and hopefully for them too. Let us pray.